Now.
Okay, thank you, and welcome to the podcast this week, UAC, with Joseph Johnson. Again, hosting our authors and friends, Jed Smith and Dr. Peter Smolinoff. We've been reviewing section by section the fringe methodologies and high performance and health, and we just start talking about the physical training last week, a little bit of the long-term athletic development as it relates to the athlete's physical development from the younger ages, and then as you come up into the older groups. So as time goes by, like with a really young youth, there's not like a really, I don't want to say a formal periodization schedule, because it's informal in many ways. You're developing, you're being directed towards the younger athlete in a particular way, but the rules of the periodization might be much looser. But once we get into later teens, now you kind of come up with a little bit more of a formalized plan for the year of programming. So Jed, before we get into it, let's discuss real quickly the background of periodization, the idea, its evolution up until this point.
Okay. Well, actually, it's been around a lot longer than I think people would admit, but it's spoken of if you look at some early texts like the Bible, it's talked about in the Bible on the seventh day, God rested. They're hinting at the idea that, we need to work, and we need to pull back. We need restoration. And it's spoken other points in the Bible as well. So we look as far back as we want to look, it's actually been applied. And with athletes and training the body, like you said, younger athletes, it's more of an informal type of a periodization. And we discussed last week on gradualism and progressive overload principles. And when you're younger and you don't really know what maximum efforts are, nor do you need to know, it should be more technical work and building volume through repetitions over time, so that the athlete gets the skill set down. But then eventually, as the athlete becomes trained and works more towards elite status, and you still want to periodize, pulling back again, as we discussed in long-term athletic development, kids get burnt out if they aren't periodizing by different sports throughout a year and sampling and have an involvement in different sports. If they do the same thing, they're going to get burnout. And Peter talked about last week how, really under age 13, there's no indicators as these kids are going to be world-class athletes. So that specificity doesn't work early on. So the idea of periodization is in the form of sampling with those younger athletes. And like Peter suggested, as many sports as they can get involved in, there's your periodization. Okay. And so the training is coming in different formats and different avenues. And so that's an early form. But if you're talking about specificity training, as they become more elite, it needs to be applied. So really, if we look back to the biblical point that was made is rest. Okay, so what is periodization? It's restoration. It's pulling back. It's cycling. It's a cyclical or a wave-like pattern where we push, and we can pull back on intensities and volume and work on, again, technique, work on restoring the body, and then push, and reach new levels, and a cyclical action will take place. But in Russia, and I'll leave this to Peter this point, but some of the first texts that we know in modern sport, 1917, Kotev wrote on Olympic sport, really coming out of Russia, on cycling with endurance athletes. And Vzorov back in Moscow, 1938. These are authors that wrote on that was track and field athletes. But you can see that they were applying those concepts, and later maybe formalized in the United States as far as not just straight push, but let's build in a cyclical pattern. Although by trial and error and personal anecdotes from coaches, you can look back to Bear Bryant. When you watch the Junction Boys, or a little of the history of football there, where he basically destroyed his entire team and he learned how to cycle things. Herb Brooks, the same thing in hockey. He learned he could push so far, they started losing, he'd have to pull back. Prior to, this is back in the 1970s with Herb Brooks. And we go back to other coaches that discovered based on trial and error. But it's been around. It's been around in different forms or fashions for a long, long time.
Yeah. I think the fringe, in addition to all that's been written, I think what's happening now is that periodization grows into longer periods in much more detail. In other words, your weekly, monthly, and yearly plans are being integrated for both high top-level athletes and younger athletes, based on a lifelong, not long-term development, but lifelong development. They're integrated into 10, 20, and lifelong plans. So this is the fringe that is useful for every person on this planet. How to prepare, not only for athletic performance, that is for competitions, but for every important, stressful, vital event of your life ahead of time, and train yourself physically, mentally. And these events happen every week on small, then every month, and then yearly events. But then what is happening more and more is these plans started to be developed 5 years before Olympic Games. In other words, the periodization grew from usually a yearly plan, and that's what we have most often done. Yearly plan. Give me your yearly plan. What is your yearly goals, objectives, and therefore your methods to reach it? It grew into four yearly plans to prepare for the next Olympic Games that are going to be 4 years. But what athletes have started to do is they started to prepare for the following Olympics prior to the current Olympics, saying these are my results leading to these games that are going to happen next year, the year after. But all my following years are planned now, and that's why Chinese are doing so well now, is because they're planning. We can see what they do is they put young athletes. They make sure that their teams have sufficient number of young athletes who compete in this Olympics. But it's not their last Olympics. They make sure that there is enough number of athletes who are going to be competing now and definitely competing in the next Olympics. So what Chinese have been doing is that you can see that they planned, they actually consider this current Olympic Games as preparation, competition for at least half of the team to the next Olympic Games. So so this current Olympic Games for them are only a milestone, because they say we want to win and we want to dominate, not now, 4 years, 8 years from now. Mm-hmm. But in order to really dominate and really prepare yourself, you need all this experience of several Olympic Games. Then you become really tough and you're ready for everything. So this is what's happening. And for young athletes, good coaches, good head coaches, a demand from their assistant coaches plans that are not only monthly and yearly, but are lifelong plans. Sit down. I was asked to sit down and tell my coach what I'm going to do and where I'm going to be and what results I want to achieve in 10 years, 20 years. So that was as a teenager. As a teenager, I was pushed to plan ahead, and but also on the other spectrum, in the Soviet Union, when I was going through my teenage training routines, I had to prepare weekly and monthly plans. I had to report on my volumes that I have done on the same page. I was given a table, and I had to indicate what is that I have done in past month per week, and what I'm gonna do in the next month per week. I think
tracking your volumes.
Yeah, going from what you've done based on what I've done. I needed to indicate to my coach what I'm going to do. So a responsibility was developed through this process of young athlete processing what has been done, how many miles you've run, how many miles you swim, how many shots you've achieved, how many shots you've done, how many jumps you've done on a horse, how many bouts have you done in fencing. I had to record all this, and based on this, I had to say, okay, I can do just a little bit more next week and next month. These are my planned numbers, and coach only helps me to adjust it. But everything was starting from me. These are the relations athlete coach that are being developed across the world now, where everything is based on numbers, history, and constant analysis. Another fringe that I want to share is a diary. I still have volumes of diaries. I had a diary for each year, and I had to write down every day what I've done. The coach would give me an assignment, but my responsibility was to record everything that I've done, to record how I feel, to record any physiological and psychological abnormalities, and my illnesses. All this is in a diary, and then anthropometry. The length of my arms, legs, all my body parts were measured, and I had to write down these measurements. So if I then look back in my diary in the past year, I had record of what I've done, how I felt, where I became sick. And I could really see when the volumes were too high for me, I was getting sick later. So I could make conclusions, even as an athlete, but together with a coach, it was very useful adjustment of the conceptual periodization into more personalized, individualized periodization. Adjustment of loads for the following year based on what happened with me in the past, based on my competition results, and I had to record competition conditions and all details about competitions, and then analyze. So we see this kind of not this kind of level of analysis. I think for now it's still lost. What we had in the Soviet Union, the level of detail in this process of planning and periodizing.
But Peter, this is actually cybernetic periodization is really what you're getting into, where feedback is used to help steer the athlete, and it's the controls of classical periodization that initially was coming out in Russia, using percentages, and this is what you do, what you have to do. and laying down and controlling all those variables for the athlete. What you're talking about here is, again, which we discuss in the book, is cybernetic periodization. A mathematician, Norbert Wiener, back in the 40s and 50s, discussed a mathematics where you actually use feedbacks. You have the controls, but then you plug in feedback where you're getting, through communication, to alter what you want based to make it more personalized and exact. It's exactly what's going on right now with COVID-19. There was absolutes, and we're trying to look at these numbers, but you're not taking in the feedback and making the adjustments, and so the numbers are always off. Okay, and so cybernetic periodization is getting feedback from the athlete. We look at right now RPE methodologies, which is really a form, but not necessarily as detailed as what we're talking about here with Peter. And the Bulgarian weightlifting system really took cybernetic periodization with Ivan Abajev, and he started looking at, okay, let me grade your technique and let me interview you and get your rate of perceived exertion. And what do you think this felt like? And, you know, now if I'm coaching Peter, Peter might think it's the most difficult thing in the world he's ever done. But I also get my feedback, and I'm grading him as well based on his technique and how smooth and good he looked in his movements. And I'd say, you know what, Peter, you know, you may be thinking that this is the most difficult thing you've ever done, but as I look at it, you did a great job. So you might want to pull back way down to here, but I actually think we need to meet somewhere in the middle, you know, because you've never been here before and you're doing great. I do agree we need to pull back, but maybe not as far as you think. That's cybernetic periodization. You're taking the feedback from the athlete, you're using your educated assessments and your expertise as the coach, and you're working together as a team, and then you have the objectives and the goals based on what science tells us and those absolutes in classical periodization models, but we deviate based on him and me and what we're both seeing. And that's cybernetic periodization.
Yeah, and this fringe, for it to spread across the world, as we are calling for in our book, education of coaches must be sufficient, and also the number of athletes per coach must be low enough. So the appreciation for the coaching provisions in the clubs, in high school, in schools, not only high schools but schools everywhere, must be much greater for this to benefit the health of society. Because if you imagine, the ideal world is that a coach explains every young athlete the basics of this periodization, as I was explained by at least 3-4, I remember, coaches who would teach me how to swim and how to run and how to do other sports. But they explained to me that, okay, we are going to now increase the volume until you are exhausted. You're gonna feel really sore. You have to be prepared. It is okay. They would explain to me the process of overloading, right? Then they would say, okay, we're preparing for this competition that is only gonna be 10 months from today, and for this you're gonna train more and more and more every day, a little bit more, gradually reach a high level of high volume. But then for you to perform well at the competition, you need to taper off and rest a little bit, so you have super compensation, and you do your best at this event. This is probably the fringe now, but what we are ideally seeing as a future is that every school kid and every parent is explained, is educated in this process. And that's how we make everyone healthier for life, because understanding how to train yourself, how to bring yourself to the most challenging level of training, and how to taper, how to rest properly, is gonna make everyone in a society more productive and healthier. And this is what's gonna make your immune system strong, not overtraining. Because now there are so many recreational athletes are training by themselves and without being able to stop on time. They do not realize how addictive sport is, and how this enjoyable, exciting sport activity may veil the pain that body gives you to say, hey, that's enough, slow down. Mm-hmm. Slow down. But a lot of people are going, okay, I'm gonna run more and more and swim more and more, and they feel great, and it's like a drug. And they overtrain, they burn out, they drop out, or they damage their health. They actually damage their immune system on the long run, and maybe for life. So this is what we're trying to do with our book, is to share the very basics, but also share some of the fringe, most advanced, most sophisticated experiences, practices, to help everyone use as much as possible of this in their everyday life, and so that it filters down to everybody. So we try to explain in very simple words in our book how this more advanced ways to periodize training work. I haven't mentioned the most basic periodization of daily training, that is going from sport into medicine. Some of the most advanced medical clinics that use exercise as medicine recommend the very high volumes of physical exercise, but many of them recommend 3 times a day. This 3 times a day training is the most advanced level of daily periodization of training and resting. Now, as we're in this coronavirus quarantine, we can all try, because we have the whole day. If we work from home, we have the whole day, and we just need this discipline of pushing ourselves into morning training before breakfast, midday training before lunch, and night training before dinner or supper. These conditions have been created for the most advanced boarding sports schools and colleges in the Soviet Union. I wouldn't call it Russia. Actually, the first one was created in Georgia, in Tbilisi, in the Republic of Georgia. And we have some of the really good ones in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, but they were also created very good ones created in the West, in Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and they have some advanced practices. But now China has also these boarding schools in each province.
One thing, Peter, I want to add on that,
and they have 3 times a week. This is the important thing, that sports schools and IMG academies type. They do twice a day. What we all must be trying to accomplish is 3 practices a day, so that we have maximum rest, maximum restoration, and minimum risk of overtraining. Jed.
Yeah, in the West, this is not necessarily common practice, multiple trainings a day, but obviously overseas, and Joseph, you know as well, that world-class athletes, multiple training sessions a day. And we do this in American football for sure, where we incorporate multiple training sessions. But being overseas and observing, like in China in their training halls and so forth, you know, I've witnessed the same thing in every sport, multiple training sessions, trying to maximize your time and rest in between. The one thing I'll say that I think is very interesting, and this is as we age, it's different. We still need multiple training sessions because, you know, as we age, our joints aren't necessarily as good as we were when we were younger. It brings energy, vigor, focus. So a morning session, this is what I've incorporated in my own life. Exercising before I start my day, trying to plug in a couple other points of exercise where they don't have to be long. But then it helps again my joints, the knees, the hips, the ankles, the shoulders, creates viscosity, and it helps my energy and my focus. And so this is what using those principles in some of these elite sport levels can be applied for longevity and health. And I think we're dealing with some feedback on this podcast, but it's I think it's very important. I think the older we get, the better it is for our health and longevity and wellness and productivity to be able to put in smaller training units throughout a day instead of working out for 2 hours straight. Smaller 45-minute sessions, 35-minute sessions. You break it up, and it's and this is again long-term athletic development. It should be done, whether it's yoga, whether it's like swimming, biking, small training units that you can apply. And I think that's important, and that's periodization.
And also,
yeah. Now I'm gonna back up just real quickly because at the beginning, just to set the groundwork, is that classical periodization was developed like around 1950. The one that we're more familiar with was by Leonid Matveyev and what we'd call the more traditional periodization models. Mm-hmm. And they were, I don't want to say totally rigid, but yeah, they had this idea of developing all of the body's systems at one time, and then maybe becoming a little bit more specialized as time passed. Throughout that season or off season, if you want to say, and then and that was used, and it's still used by younger athletes. And then block periodization, if you want to call it that, was developed by a couple of people are taking credit for it. So Dr. Veroshansky says it was his idea, and then a couple other people say it was their idea. But point being is that in each one of those, now the important issue that Peter brought up is the feedback, and because everyone's an individual, nothing fits exactly. And the one thing that I found in my own coaching is that you need to find out what that sweet spot is for a particular athlete and how they improve. So someone who has a very sensitive nervous system can get overtrained pretty easy, and then somebody else, it's totally different, and you have to kind of find where that area is where they respond really well. And this is where it becomes much more sophisticated, like what you guys are talking about. You have to be able to take the feedback from the athlete anecdotally, or like watching what they're doing and then listening to them and then bringing them together, trying to make decisions that and help the athlete. And I think that's kind of where you guys are going with that, correct?
Yeah, and you're right, Joseph. But the thing is that it can become very dangerous, and a lot of the ideas taken from cybernetic periodization, where it's just straight RPE and you leave it up to the athlete. That's not cybernetic periodization.
Right.
That's giving the athlete 100% control, and that's where it can be dangerous, because how does the athlete know? You're the expert, you are the professional, and so you use a classical concept of where you need to get the athlete and bring them, and then you're using feedback. But again, there's a method of maximal effort. Whatever your maximal effort is going to be different the next time. Like Peter was saying in his journals, the diaries that they were taking, which we've had lengthy discussions on this when he was an athlete, and the journaling that you turn into your coach, and you would, this is the feedback. But the coach still is the authority on it, and the coach still says, okay, I understand what you're saying. I'm going to take this into consideration, but here's what we have to do. And it might not be comfortable right now, but we're going to get you to a new maximal effort in your training loads and training intensity. You've never been here before, and I'm going to bring you to a new level. So just use an RPE, which has gotten to be a very popular concept here in strength training over the last decade, and even the fitness world. It goes beyond that. We're looking at always increasing your maximal training resistance, and that needs, and you're still grading the technique. If they break down and the technique suffers, we're too far. We're too far beyond. So it's feedback from the athlete, feedback from the coach, and following what we know to be true through time-tested periodization models.
So another little fringe that is becoming a mass participation requirement is roughly we need the same amount of time we spend on specialization, we need to spend on conditioning. I think in the US, Nike, Oregon, Nike is a good example of following this practice. They run and work on their specialized running. If they do it for an hour, then every day, then they spend another hour on stretching and other conditioning exercises that, to support the specialized training. I think this very rough. It's very rough, 50-50. But it's an example of how high performance sport is recommending and is driving mass participation sport in this conceptual periodization to give advice on what's needed to be successful, to be growing. We know how many hours you need to sleep, 8 hours a day. We know that you need a rest day, a minimum one rest day a week. That how you periodize during the week. Everyone pretty much knows now, or it's almost common knowledge now, and everybody knows that you go through in increased volumes and the low speed, then you increase the speed and decrease volume before competition, or decrease volume, increase strength if it's a strength competition. In order to perform well, if you do it monthly, that's a good idea. 3 weeks of training, half a week tapering, competition, couple of weeks, sorry, a couple of days, 3 days of rest. And this monthly schedule is an example of I don't know, what many high performance athletes do, and what recreational participants can also use, and recreational coaches can also use as a typical monthly training regime to. Because what we're talking about is very complicated, and in our book we try to simplify and give very simple example. What does periodization mean for me as a coach of young kids and as a participant? So one very simple example: during 3 weeks, increase your volumes. Then for several days, decrease the volume, increase speed or increase strength, your competition day, and then rest for several days. That's your month. And then you start your next month again with a bit lower volume, increase the volume. As you're increasing your volume, you're decreasing the speed and strength. Then again, several days before competition, you drop the volume, increase the speed, increase the strength, compete, rest again, and then that's a very good start. That's something that's very primitive that you can start with as your periodization at the very low amateur level. To get excited about it, and then you can make it again. It will grow into a longer, detailed periodization, and your weekly and daily periodization will become more and more detailed. And that's how anybody can approach this opportunity to advance and take advantage of the periodization concept.
Hey, the feedback is sound too well. I'm thinking on this particular episode, but we cover a lot here. I don't know if you're picking up on that feedback and stuff, and you are, Peter, but
A little bit, yeah.
So see how this turns out. I'm gonna say, because this on my end, it sounds brutal, but it might be different on you guys' end. But I'm gonna say we kind of wrap this up, and then with more physical training. We look at different elite system training, and then touch base on parametric training a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good idea.
So, Peter,
Okay.
I just think that I don't know how it's going to come.
Yeah, the quality on it's getting lower as we go.
Yeah. So, well, anyways, I think we got a lot of material. I hope it's useful because I mean, we did have we did get into quite a few things here. We'll see how it works. But I guess until next, gentlemen.
Pick it back up next week.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.